Nothing in my life came easy. Not the apartment, not the car, not the savings account I built from scratch while working double shifts at the hospital. My younger brother had always been the one my parents drove to every hockey practice, cheered for at every tournament, and bailed out every single time he called home in a panic. I was the one who figured things out on my own. I told myself that was fine. I told myself I didn't need what he got. I told myself that for 29 years. Then one Thursday evening in February, my dad took my car keys off the kitchen counter while I was standing right there, and handed them to my brother without blinking. I had bought the Jeep Grand Cherokee the previous spring, $47,000. I'd saved for 3 years, made every payment on time, kept the insurance current, and never once asked my parents for a cent. It was the first major thing I had ever bought for myself, and I was proud of it in a way I hadn't been proud of anything in a long time. That vehicle represented something. It meant I had built something real. My brother, on the other hand, had lost his license the previous summer after his second speeding ticket in 18 months. He was 32 years old, living in my parents' basement in Mississauga, and had not held a stable job since he left his position at the logistics company the year before. My parents never talked about any of that. When they talked about him, it was always about his potential, what he was capable of, what he would do someday. I had stopped waiting for them to talk about me the same way. The night it happened, I had driven to my parents' house for dinner. I do that sometimes on Thursdays because my mother cooks, and it saves me a trip to the grocery store. And, honestly, because some part of me still wants to feel like a family. I should have known better. I always should have known better. My brother had apparently told my parents that he needed to drive across town to pick up some tools he was borrowing from a friend, and that his ride had fallen through. My dad came into the kitchen while I was helping my mother with the dishes, picked up my keys from the counter where I'd set them down when I walked in, and said, almost casually, that he was going to lend my brother the Jeep. I said no. I said it clearly. I set down the dish towel and I looked at my father and I said no. Those are my keys. That is my vehicle. He doesn't have a valid license. My dad looked at me the way he always looks at me when I push back on something involving my brother, like I was being unreasonable. Like I was making a scene over nothing. He's just going across town, my dad said. It'll take an hour. His license is suspended, I said. It's fine. It was not fine. I told him again that the answer was no. My mother stayed at the sink with her back to us. She didn't say a word. She never does when it's my brother on the line. My dad looked at the keys in his hand, looked at me, and then walked out of the kitchen. I stood there for a moment thinking he had listened. Then I heard the front door open. I heard my brother's voice. I heard my dad say something I couldn't make out. I walked to the front hallway, and my brother was already heading down the driveway toward my Jeep. I shouted after him. I told him to stop. I told him those were my keys and I had not given permission. My brother waved his hand at me without turning around, like I was a minor inconvenience, got into my vehicle, and drove away. My dad came back inside and told me to calm down. My mother came out of the kitchen and suggested I have a cup of tea. I want to be honest about what happened next, because I've thought about it many times since, and I wish I had done things differently. I did not call the police. I know now that I should have. I know that the moment my father handed my keys to a suspended driver who had taken my vehicle without my consent, I had every legal right to report it stolen. I didn't do it because I was still standing in my parents' house, and some old, deeply conditioned part of me was still trying to find a version of this situation where everyone got to be okay. Where my brother came back in an hour with the tools, and my dad admitted he shouldn't have done it and we all moved past it. That's not what happened. I stayed at my parents' house that night, because my dad had my keys and there was no way for me to get home anyway without calling a cab. I slept in my old room and I lay awake for a long time listening to the sounds of the house, waiting to hear the Jeep pull into the driveway. At 6:14 in the morning, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, a 905 area code. I answered it. The voice on the other end was a man. He said his name was a name I'll leave out. He said he had been involved in an accident on Dundas Street West and that the other driver had been driving a dark gray Jeep Grand Cherokee and had left the scene. He said the police were there. He said he had found my registration in the glove compartment and was calling to let me know what had happened to my vehicle. I sat up in that bed and I don't think I breathed for about 4 seconds. I said, "Is the vehicle drivable?" He said no. I said, "Is the driver there?" He said the driver had left. My brother had driven my Jeep into another vehicle, left the scene of the accident, and come home at some point in the night while I was lying awake in the next room. I didn't even know he was back. I found out because a stranger called me from a crash site. I got up and walked down the hall to the room my brother uses when he stays there. I knocked once and opened the door. He was in bed. He looked at me and then looked at the ceiling. "What happened?" I said. "I'm fine," he said. "Thanks for asking." "I'm asking what happened to my Jeep." He said there had been an accident. He said it wasn't really his fault. He said the other driver had pulled out without signaling. He said the damage wasn't that bad. He said a lot of things that I would later discover were not true. I went downstairs. My parents were already in the kitchen. My dad was making coffee. My mother was at the table. They both knew. The way they were sitting, the way my dad didn't look up when I came in, the way my mother immediately started talking about breakfast like that was a normal thing to do at 6:30 in the morning. They already knew. "Did he tell you?" I said. My dad put a mug down on the counter. "We can figure this out," he said. "He left the scene of an accident." I said. "I told you not to give him my keys." My mother said, "Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be." I have heard that sentence in various forms my entire life. Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be. It's what my family says when I have a legitimate reason to be upset, and acknowledging that would be inconvenient. Over the next hour, while I was still sitting at that kitchen table, my parents laid out what they wanted to happen. They wanted me to call my insurance company and report that I had been the driver. That was the plan. My brother had a suspended license, which meant if he was listed as the driver, the insurance claim would be denied and he could face criminal charges for driving without a valid license and leaving the scene. If I said I was driving, they said, it would be messy but manageable. My dad actually used that word, manageable. I looked at him and I said, "You want me to commit insurance fraud?" He said, "I want you to help your brother." I said, "I told him not to take my car. I told you not to give him my keys. You did it anyway. The car is wrecked, and now you want me to lie to my insurance company." My mother started crying. She does that sometimes when the conversation starts going in a direction she doesn't like. I used to feel guilty when she cried. I don't anymore, or at least I'm working on it. I did not agree to their plan. I left my parents' house that morning, called a ride and went home. I called my insurance company and I told them the truth. I told them I had not been the driver. I told them my vehicle had been taken without my consent by a family member who did not have a valid license. I told them what had happened. The claims process is its own thing and I won't go into all of it, but what happened after that is what I want to tell you about. My dad called me 3 times that day. Each time, his tone was a little different. The first call was still trying to convince me. He said the damage wasn't that serious, the other driver hadn't been hurt, this could all just go away quietly. The second call was more pointed. He said I was putting my brother's entire future at risk over a car. The third call, he said I had always made things difficult. That third one sat with me for a while. I had always made things difficult. I thought about the times I had not made things difficult. I thought about the university tuition I paid myself, because my parents had spent the money they'd saved for both of us on a renovation my brother had talked them into for a business idea that never happened. I thought about the Christmas I worked through, because my brother was short on rent, and they'd used the gift money to help him. I thought about the last 4 years of watching my parents pick up his bills, his excuses, his messes, while I built my life alone across town and called every Thursday for dinner because I still wanted to be part of this family. I had always made things difficult. My brother did not call me at all that day. He texted once, about a week later. The text said, "Can we talk?" I didn't respond right away. I needed time to think, and I also needed some information I didn't have yet. Because while all of this was unfolding, there was something else that had been bothering me. Something I couldn't account for. The man who had called me from the crash site, the other driver, had mentioned that there was a passenger in my Jeep. He mentioned it casually like it was obvious, and then the conversation moved on and I didn't press him on it, but afterward I kept coming back to it. My brother had said he was going to pick up tools from a friend. He had been alone when he left the house, so who was in the vehicle with him? I called the man back. He was patient with me and he remembered clearly. He said there had definitely been someone in the passenger seat. A woman, he thought, though he hadn't gotten a good look. He said the passenger had also left the scene quickly after the accident. He said he had assumed they left together. I asked him if the police had taken note of the passenger. He said he'd mentioned it to them, but he didn't think they'd gotten a description. I sat with that for a few days. Then I started asking around in the way that you do when you're trying to understand something and you're not sure who's safe to ask. My brother's best friend from high school, someone I'll call his longtime friend, had stayed in touch with me over the years, though we'd never been close. He'd always seemed like someone who told the truth more than my brother did. I reached out to him and asked if he knew anything about what my brother had been doing the night of the accident. There was a pause before he answered. A pause long enough that I knew he knew something. He said my brother had been seeing someone, a woman who worked near downtown Mississauga. He said he didn't know much about her. He said he thought the relationship had been going on for several months. He said he was sorry, and I wasn't sure exactly what he was apologizing for, but I thanked him anyway. I need to explain why this mattered beyond the obvious. My brother has a girlfriend. They've been together for 2 years. She lives in Hamilton. My parents know her. She's been at Christmas dinner. This is not just a detail about who was in the passenger seat. It is a layer of the situation that my parents, I now realized, may also have known about, and it changed the picture of why they were so desperate for the accident to disappear. Because if my brother was driving a suspended license with a woman who wasn't his girlfriend in my vehicle at 2 in the morning, and there was a police report, and his girlfriend or her family started asking questions, this was not just about an insurance claim anymore. This was about my parents managing something much larger. I am not the one who told his girlfriend. I want to be clear about that. I made a deliberate choice not to insert myself into that situation. What happened between them is not mine to narrate. But I know they broke up in the spring, and I know my brother blamed me for it, and I know that's not accurate or fair. What I did do was hire a lawyer, not because I was planning to sue anyone, at least not initially, but because I wanted to understand my rights and what my liability might look like given the whole situation. My lawyer looked over everything and told me I was not liable for anything since I had not consented to the vehicle being taken and had reported it accurately to my insurance company. She also told me that my father, by physically handing the keys to a suspended driver, had exposed himself to some potential liability, and that this was something my insurance company might want to look into. I did not ask my insurance company to pursue that. I'm not sure why. Inertia, maybe, or some remnant of the part of me that still wanted to protect my family from consequences they had created entirely for themselves. I don't know that I made the right call there. But I let it go. The Jeep was written off. The repair estimate came in at $31,000 and the vehicle was assessed at a value that made writing it off the simpler option. I received a settlement from my insurer, though it was several $1,000s less than I had paid for the vehicle the year before. My premiums went up. None of that was my fault and all of it cost me real money. My dad came to my apartment in March. He knocked on my door unannounced, which he had never done before. I let him in because I didn't know what else to do in that moment. He sat at my kitchen table. And he was quieter than I had ever seen him. He didn't try to argue or convince me of anything. He just sat there for a moment, and then he said that he knew he had put me in a bad position. I waited. He said the thing with my brother's personal life had been a surprise to him and my mother. He said they hadn't known the full situation when they were asking me to help cover it. He said they had thought it was just about the license. I don't know if I believe that completely, but I let him say it. I told him that the issue for me was never only the accident. I told him I had been watching my whole life while my brother got the benefit of the doubt, and I got the assumption that I would be fine. I told him about the tuition money, about the Christmas, about 10 other small things that had accumulated over years into a weight I had been carrying quietly, because I didn't want to be the one who made things bigger than they needed to be. My dad listened. He didn't interrupt. At the end he said, "I didn't know you felt that way." I said, "I know. That's part of the problem." He left without us resolving anything, but it was the most honest conversation I had ever had with him. I'm still not sure what to do with that. My brother and I have not spoken since the text he sent in the spring. I know he's told people his version of the story, and I know his version involves me being unforgiving and difficult and willing to destroy family over a car. I have stopped trying to control what people believe about that. The people who know me know me. My mother calls every week or two. She doesn't bring up my brother or the accident. We talk about other things. It's a strange kind of normal, where we both know there's a subject-shaped hole in every conversation. But we talk around it because she's my mother and I'm not ready to let go of that entirely. Maybe someday we'll be able to talk about all of it directly. Maybe not. What I know is this. I spent a long time in that family telling myself that being self-sufficient meant I didn't need what my brother was given. I told myself that needing it was weakness. I told myself that being passed over again and again was just the cost of being independent. I had that all wrong. Being independent didn't mean I deserved less. It meant I had learned to keep going without support I should have had. Those are not the same thing. The morning after my dad handed my keys to my brother, and my brother drove away, and my mother offered me tea like everything was fine. That morning, I lay in my old bed and stared at the ceiling and felt something I had never quite let myself feel before. Not anger. I'd felt angry plenty of times. This was something closer to clarity, the kind that hurts a little because it means you can't unsee what you've seen. I have not lied for my family. I am not going to start now. My Jeep is gone. My savings took a hit I'm still recovering from. My brother is angry at me, and my parents are navigating whatever version of this they've constructed for themselves. And I am in my apartment in Etobicoke, 31 years old, figuring out what comes next. Not because anyone helped me get here, because I always figure things out on my own. That used to feel like a burden. These days, I'm starting to think of it differently.